All right, this is a big one for me, my friends. This is a really big interview. I've been wanting to talk to this man for quite some time. I've been hounding him. I've been bothering him for the last few months, and we finally got it done. You know this face. You know this living legend, arguably the greatest professional wrestler in the history of the business, the limousine riding, the jet plane flying, the kiss stealing, the wheeling dealing, the nature boy himself, Ric Flair on the program. I mean, I have died and gone to heaven. This is tremendous. Rick, thank you so much for this honor. It's a real
Oh, hey,
pleasure.
I'm very honored to be on the show, and I'm sorry that I have been disorganized, but along with all those accolades, that's the award that might follow me around.
Well, it's
So
all
I
good.
apologize. It certainly wasn't intentional. We've had a lot going on, which I guess is always a good thing when you're working and shooting different or involved with different projects. So I'm glad this came about, and of course we're going to be talking about the big fight Saturday night, I'm sure. So
Absolutely. And that's actually when I rev things up to try and finally reach you, because as you well know, back in January, a young man named Michael Chandler made his UFC debut. And I'm a longtime fan of professional wrestling. And I do a show with Daniel Cormier, who is also a big pro wrestling fan. And leading up
yeah,
to that fight, we were talking about how Michael Chandler coming from Bellator was reminiscent of you coming to the WWF in 1991, proclaiming yourself the real world champion, winning the Royal Rumble. And we suggested to Chandler, who isn't, as big of a fan as we are, but knows the business. We said, hey, you should do the 92 Royal Rumble promo. He never acknowledged it until in the cage that moment, he
yeah.
copies your promo. When you found out about this, when you heard about this, what was your reaction?
Well, I was flattered, obviously, because it's like football teams and or football colleges, universities, multiple professional teams have all taken a little bit of my history and involved it in their either in their pre-game hype or their post-game celebration, and that was it's a true story. I don't really know how to compare Bellator. I don't want to say something that's not politically correct to UFC, but clearly they're not on the same level in terms of notoriety. And I feel safe saying that. And so for Michael to come from there, it's my understanding it was a huge statement that really made Bellator look really good. Not to say what it did, not to mention what it did for himself to walk in the door, and now he's got a pretty tough kid, I guess, Saturday night. So I just was, I tried to look up and have a little, knowledge of the history of each one of them. So I don't know what to expect. What do you think?
Oh, this is a really tough fight. The guy he's fighting, Charles Oliveira, is a veteran who's
Yep.
been in the UFC since 2010, but had some issues with weight cutting and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
finding the right spot for himself in the promotion. But as of late, he has looked like a world beater. And what's so interesting about him is he's really good off his back. He's a great jiu-jitsu practitioner. Michael's a great wrestler,
Yes.
but I would perhaps advise not to take this fight to the mat because of how good Oliveira is, to try to keep the fight standing and try to beat him, with his punches, with his boxing.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious to see how it plays out. You gonna watch it?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I would have watched anyway, just because of the, the attention that he gave me, which I was thrilled and honored to, anytime you've, someone does anything that emulates something that you've done in your career, it's very rewarding, almost as rewarding as when it was happening. Does that make sense? Because
Absolutely.
it's all these years later. So to give you a little background with my MMA stuff, I used to own 10 Gold's gyms in the Carolinas. And one day, a guy named Ken Shamrock walked in my gym, and he was getting ready to fight the original, I believe, the Gracie father, who was the first Gracie,
The Hoist Gracie.
Hoist Gracie,
Yeah.
in
UFC
Charlotte.
one. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. In
and
Charlotte. Okay.
yeah, and before Ken was wrestling,
Wow.
and so I met him, and I met Gracie, and then I went to the fight that night with Jimmy Brown, former
Wow.
football player from the Bears,
Yep.
or from the Cleveland Browns. Excuse me, God, I'll get in trouble for that. from the Browns, and a guy that I've gotten to know, over the years. So that was my first experience, and I'll be honest with you, with the rules the way they were then, I was so bored, and I watched a couple more times. And this is, I guess, when you guys didn't break. I'm not sure how that evolved, but when he was sitting in that clinch was not what I came to see. You know what I mean? And that's why I kind of lost it for a while. Then they changed the format. I'm not sure about that, about where they had to start them back up on their feet after a period of time. And I think it made it much more interesting and really gave a guy, a guy could have a great single, like you say, like a great amateur background, take somebody down, but just to be put in a lock for 30 minutes. I mean, and I think that the format being changed as a result of that made it a lot more interesting. And it made it, I'm still always going to be one of these guys that thinks the wrestlers got the advantage. It's not because I was a wrestler. Um, but wrestling, I have known some really tough guys over the years, wrestlers. You probably remember TJ Ward, Kurt Angle, and then the success that Brock has had. And I think Bobby Lashley. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Froze there for a quick second, but we're back now.
Yeah, I think Bobby Lashley had a pretty good run with Bellator, and I've got friends that have been in it, and I've been around it a lot to see Brock, to go back and forth and just be this phenomenal athlete. I mean, maybe the best athlete I've ever seen. If you look at it from our perspective, I'm not saying he's better than Dion or better than Bo Jackson, but the way we measure things, you and I, there's no denying that Brock Lesnar isn't one of the best athletes of all time.
Oh,
He almost made the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, come
right.
on.
With no
So
background in football.
yeah, and then this past weekend, or 2 weekends ago, I spent the weekend with Chuck Liddell and his wife. So, and I have a chance to pick his brain because I love the 30 for 30. We're in the 30 for 30 club with he and Tito, and I've gotten to know Tito over the years. So it's something you if you something that you've been around, you can't help but be intrigued by it, because you got to be a really tough guy, a really tough guy. I mean, take technique, take the repetitions and the training out. At the end of the day, it's got to be in your heart. I mean, there's no other way, or here and here, to be sitting in a chokehold and trying to figure out whether you're gonna negotiate this or tap out. You know what I mean? Or a submission.
Right. I've asked this question to Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, The Rock, Booker T. If MMA was as popular today as it was when you were 20 years old, when you were figuring out what you would want to do with your life, do you think you would have gone in that direction, or do you think it was always going to be pro wrestling?
Well, I don't know. I think to be in the business when I was, you had to be tough, but I don't think I was ever that tough. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that I was the baddest apple, but I wrestled with guys every night in the 70s that were real tough.
Right.
Real tough. I mean, MMA tough plus.
Who was the toughest?
The two toughest guys, and there isn't an MMA fighter today that you could name them. I just met Frank Mir. I'll go all down the line of all the guys. There isn't an MMA fighter. I feel real confident in saying this, that if there were no rules, I'm talking about no rules, locked into a room with Harley Race or a guy named Haku, that would make it out. I've seen them. I've seen Haku beat up 9 cops and eat 3 cans of mace.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen him bite a guy's nose off. Yes, and Harley Race did the same way. Harley Race would hurt you just looking at you. So once again, that's nothing. It's never going to happen. But you're asking how I feel because I've seen some really tough guys over the years. You know what I mean? And in our business, if a guy was real tough, you just stayed close to the ropes because the referee had to break the count. And if you could get to the rope, a guy would let you up, or like Jack Briscoe used to ride me around. And you remember Jack from Oklahoma, 31-0, of course, real tough. But I had to wrestle Jack a lot. He would just take me down, and I would just scramble to the rope. But the guys that are tough, some of them want you to remind you, and I've been seeing a lot of that. I've been hit really hard by some tough guys. But to be answered, to just give me the straightest answer again, I don't think I was ever tough enough to be here or there. To
Okay, I
be
appreciate that.
no, it's the truth. I don't. I see what these guys do, and I go. I think I was as good as I think I was in as good condition because I was a 500 free squat, 200 push-up guy every day of my life. Hindu squats and all that conditioning. I think people will always concede that to me, but I don't honestly think I would have had the heart, and I can say that without, without I hope discrediting myself.
No, of course. No,
Yeah,
I appreciate you saying that.
I've seen some tough guys, but what these guys do and what they go through, um, and I'm talking about when they lock the door, is like I say, two men walk. Used to go, two men walk the aisle, two and one man walks back, and that's what MMA really is. So
Could I ask about 92? That's to me one of the greatest post-match promos in the history of pro wrestling. Did you have that planned in your mind? Like, I say
absolutely
this
not.
with a tear in my eye, and that was all in the moment off the cuff.
Yeah, everything my whole life that has ever been, that people will that through YouTube and through the wonderful WWE library and the people that have preserved all this for years. Everything I ever said that was any that like you would have like the limousine ride and all that. That was all right here.
Wow.
It just coming out of Buckhead at 4 a.m. in the morning, taking a shower and going to TV. In this case, Albany, New York, I was merely saying what was the truth. WCW broke me in half. Literally, I can remember a guy looking at Jim Hurd, whose name it doesn't even matter,
Oh, I remember.
a good friend of mine, and he said he wanted me to cut my hair. He wanted to call me Spartacus. And I've been the world champion 8 times in the real world of the NWA. I mean, did you? Nobody understands when you wrestle 280 hours, hour matches in 1 year, 3 years in a row plus 1 year 300, and wrestle every day, 365 days, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday, and a lot of times it was 2 hours on each day. You come from a different world, and to have that just yanked out from under my feet, Ariel, and someone wanting to just change and said that we need to change it. That's old stuff. It literally it was devastating. So that's why in my 30 for 30, I went and saw a sports psychologist. And John Simpson's his name. I would recommend him to anybody when he asked me about drinking and how often I drink and how many days I worked. The time we got through talking, he was late. He couldn't believe the pace of life. And it wasn't just me, but if you were the world champion for the NWA, you were a different kind of cat. And I mean, the divorce record speaks for itself. But if you were wrestling with Dory and Terry and Jack and Harley and Dusty, I mean, it's just a different time in life. That's what we did. We didn't look at it as being work either. You know what I mean? We look at it as being, God, just you felt like you had been. That was the mecca to be the NWA World Champion. It was like, how there's always these different titles that they tried to put together, and then now the WWE is the title. But for years it was the NWA here, and then WWE, and then TNA. I mean, I think everybody is conceded to the fact that the WWE is the well. There's no concession to it. They are,
Right.
and they have two world champions for each brand, and those ultimately are the guys that represent the company because they're damn good at what they do. And both Roman Reigns, who doesn't have an MMA background, but is a Samoan kid who's tougher
Hmm.
than Bobby Lashley, is pretty damn tough too.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? I don't know Bobby. I've never seen him in action. I have seen Roman's dad kick ass. All those Samoan kids, man, are badass. The Usos, they come from a different world, man. Jimmy Snuka, Curtis, Curtis, okay. I mean, the list of guys. they come up from a Samoan background, and they're very disciplined, and they're really good athletes.
Are you, Rick, a nostalgic person? Do you find yourself thinking back to those days in the 70s and 80s with
Oh,
NWA?
sure.
You think about that a lot?
I do, yeah, especially when I was sick. I spent when I got sick 4 years ago, Ariel. I had never watched anything but Sports Center in my life for 40 years, because I just boom out moving. I mean, on the road, and even when I retired in 2008, I came back to work because I needed the money. No, I did because I started thinking back, and then I wanted to make sure, on a very personal note, that what hit me the hardest was that I wanted to make sure that when you think you've died or you almost have died, then you sit there and worry about dying for a year. I wanted to make sure that I communicated to everyone that I cared about that I love them, because I got when I was dying, I got so many people reaching out to me that I wasn't aware of, because I didn't have a cell phone when I was on life support for 13 days, and then I had all these texts. It took me a couple of years to return them all, but people reaching out, and then I thought to myself, boy, you regret every cheap shot you've ever taken, and we all have, myself included. You've said and written things that are been quoted, because you said out of anger over the years. And to look back, and here I am, 72 years old, and I have great health. I'm back up and running, thanks to Wendy again. You're thankful for a lot of things with Wendy. I'm thankful for
Mhm.
endless things. I mean, seriously, I had a stoma for a year, which is
Wow.
the bowel being attached to the
Wow.
outside. The maintenance on that alone, and she took care of me every day. We hired full-time help, but it was with that you end up having a different person come periodically, and it's a very what's the word I'm trying to say? Not intimate, but it's a very um what's the word I'm looking for? But
What's it?
it's just it's
Private.
a very private, sensitive issue,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not, it's just nothing you want everyone to be involved. I mean, in a stranger every day. So Wendy went and took a class in it and learned how to change it, and we got through a year, and then I had the reversal and came out of that, but was right to the wire. 10 days they were gonna, put the bag back on, but I came through that. So then you have this experience again where you just want to make sure the people that you care about, know, whether it be family or friends, and that's
So did you feel like when you were when you were sick, I believe it was 2016, right? Um,
17,
17,
17.
excuse me.
Yeah,
Did
be
you
four
did
years in August.
did you feel like the you were facing death, that the end was near, and that it was important to go back and look at those moments and reconnect with them?
Well, they only gave me 5 months to live
Wow.
when I left the hospital. So, that's which, I know now they didn't tell me that at the time. But when I got home, um, there were talks in my family about putting me in a nursing home,
Wow.
which we could have afforded to do, but Wendy said no, because it was, I mean, I just sat in a black chair, and, I'm sitting in it right now. And, I didn't have any memory of the past, up until, let me see, I got out of the hospital in September. Then I spent a month in rehab, learning how to walk. Walk. I mean, I was so physical, I couldn't even twist the bottle top off like a Diet Pepsi or snap the can. And then I came home, and I was just so fragile. I can look at pictures. I mean, I lost my hair. It was that bad. And then yeah, so I sat there thinking, and I just remember texting Stephanie McMahon and Hunter and Vince and my girls, and my wife, anybody that I just you just think, my God, you want them, I want. I'm like, I still get emotional about it, but my goal now is And it's kind of hard. Like when I go, you're not asking me questions about other people. We're having a podcast just talking about life. When I enjoy these and my thoughts about something that I'm just have limited knowledge of, but I'm a fan of. So because every time you say something, somebody will put it in a different context, and it's like now the new thing is you're so everything is taken out of context, and it's social media. So I'm very careful about what I say, and I mean, God forbid I say my daughter's the greatest wrestler alive. You know what I mean? Who are you to say it? Well, I'm Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And who are you to say it? You know what I mean? But I just don't even do it because it gets turned around, and it's you've got celebrity, you're a television star, and you probably got children, and you have to walk around, and where I was so problematic and did so many things wrong and misbehaved at the highest possible level. As hard as I worked, as hard as I worked, I partied. Ariel, you have no idea. You've heard stories about guys. You should have spent a week with me. Sydney, Australia on Friday for an hour. St. Louis, or I'm sorry, Sydney, Australia on Wednesday for an hour. St. Louis on Friday for an hour. Tokyo on
Oh,
Sunday for an hour.
geez.
That was just 1 week.
Wow.
And I had a few drinks coming and going. Yeah, that was an example of what my schedule was like, and it was an hour every night because the rules were back then. If you didn't, it's wanted their guy to get beat. So, and oftentimes, much to their dismay, it just made the guy look worse because it's hard to wrestle an hour.
You,
I tell Wendy, these guys about boxing, just try holding your hands
yeah.
5 minutes like this. What's this for 12 rounds, right?
Hmm.
And these MMA guys, man, I mean, just kicking it's amazing, and so much respect to them, so
Do you,
much respect.
do you find yourself, do you live with a lot of regret, or do you feel like you're now living with less regret because you've gotten this new lease on life and you're trying to appreciate these days because you had that scare back in 2017? How do you feel in your heart right now?
I feel like I live with less regret. Yeah, I mean, my 30 for 30 basically said it. There were two ways I could have played it, and actually, Rory gave Wendy the option. It's where I make this comeback, which I have, or leave it. I don't know. I guess we didn't have an option. That's okay. It doesn't matter because it I never would ever. And I all I could say at the end of all that is that I hope that people remember me as being that. But I will never be in my mind that because I've seen better now. And just for saying something on the record, Shawn Michaels is the best in ring performer of all time. There are some guys that are close. I'm not one of them. I'm not saying if I had trained myself that I couldn't have done some of the stuff he did. It wasn't called upon, when I was doing it. You know what I mean? And but I mean, I said that to him, but I got mad at him for what he said about me when he said I didn't know who Ric Flair was, who Richard Flair was. I don't know if you saw the 30 for 30,
I did. Yep.
but yeah, it's so. But you got to take the good with the bad. Was I irresponsible? Jim Ross said, yeah. Was I right? Absolutely. Some towns just lonely,
Hmm.
nowhere to go. Every town wasn't Chicago.
Hmm.
If it was Chicago, I'd never be lonely. If it was LA, I wouldn't be lonely. New York, but for every Chicago, I hate the state of Kansas hates me. There's there's a Hayes, Kansas, or a Hutchinson, Kansas, where I would have wrestled an hour, believe it or not, in a used car parking lot in the rain.
Wow.
People were walking around looking at used cars. The world champion. I changed clothes in the bathroom of the dealership.
Wow.
That was the NWA world champion. The next night, I'm in Chicago, sold out, 20,000 people. It was different.
Recently, we saw you with your daughter on camera
Mhm.
in this storyline, and I'm just wondering, you know, I mean, the stuff was phenomenal. I'm a father. I have a
Yeah.
daughter, certainly not the age of your daughter,
Mhm.
Charlotte. But how did I mean? Was that uncomfortable for you? How did you feel about that? Because at times it's
You're talking about the Lacey Evans
yeah,
thing?
Lacey Evans, but the
Yeah.
things she was saying to you. I mean, of course, I know
Yeah.
it's within the show, but like some of it seemed, and maybe I'm being naive, but some of it seemed like it was close to the line there between father and daughter. Did you feel comfortable with everything?
In this instance, I didn't. It did a difference because the one thing I've learned that you're not going to win a war that when someone's got their mind made up, and she most definitely didn't like it. But I the one thing I can say about me and my is I always said yes because and that's I didn't want to be that guy that was always going, oh God, that isn't perfect for me. I mean, I don't know how much you followed my career, but I mean, I have been buried in the desert by Russo. I've had my head shaved. I mean, if you look at the other top guys in our industry, whether it's Shawn or Hunter, Undertaker, or Bret Hart, whatever, nobody's gone through all this. I mean, I've done everything. Steve got fired for a year because I took my son to the AU Nationals, where Dan Severn was the master of ceremonies, and he did win. Um, and I mean, just I've weathered every storm, and I've come back. And but when that was all over, I was mad. But now, I don't feel I don't. I just look back and say I weathered it, and this was something new. I got the TV, and Mr. McMahon wasn't there to argue the point with, and he had stuff going on, and I don't like to put the pressure on someone if I can't talk to him.
Okay.
And he just said he just made up his mind. I think a lot of it's because she's a Marine, and I mean, God only knows we cannot give enough back to the people that serve in the military. That's a given. And I think he wanted her to be successful, and the way to get successful sometimes is to take two of the people that are doing really well and give them the rub. And she's a really nice girl, all that, but it didn't fit this time. You know what I mean? But we made the best of it. And then ultimately she ended up, she's pregnant now with her husband, and it was never anything personal. I barely know her, and her whole life is her husband and her daughter. So, but it just no, I didn't like that one. Uh, I, it's me. I'd rather to him. I'm always going to be the kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing. You know what I mean? Which is great because he likes that. Even though he hated it when I used to say it, he used to say, "80s heels don't draw." 80s heels
That's
I can
amazing.
give you, I can give you 1,000 examples. God damn it! Go out there and lead by example. If I put you on the first match, it's where you begin. Where you like, I'm not on the regular. I'm in the dark match. I don't care. You lead by example around here. These people look up to you. Okay. Then no, you're not going to win the argument because he's smarter and he's the boss.
Mhm.
And he may be the smartest guy I've ever met because he, he never stops being the best. You know what I mean? And the WWE, it's a totally different entity than UFC. But if you look at it, more and more the guys are bringing more pizzazz to the ring, that's just it. That doesn't say that they're any less tough. They're just throwing some little showmanship into it.
Mhm.
And for Michael to say that night, that was really heartfelt for me when I said it. It just I was saying, hey guys, I wasn't good enough down there. Are you kidding me? I'm Ric Flair. He pumped the air back into me, and I was deflated. Once I got there, I was fine. I just had to get away from that.
Mhm.
I had a bunch of friends up there. I just had another year and a half, greatest time of my life, and the worst mistake I ever made was because then once again I'm up against, you know, what they forget. is out of sight, out of mind, right? Well, I'd been on TV for 40 years by that time. It doesn't happen overnight. And then they keep bringing me back, right? So in this case, if I hadn't gone back, if they hadn't asked me back, Ariel, in 2001, I don't know that what my legacy would. I don't even know if you'd have me on your show today,
Hmm.
because they brought me back, and Hunter would take nothing less than, you're the only one doesn't know who you are, Rick. You're the only one doesn't know who you are. Just get, but you can't when you've lost it here, which you may have friends and or know of people, and when you lose it here, I never lost it here, and physically I'm, thank God. I mean, I don't. I feel like $1,000,000, and I'm totally healed from all my problems with with that health issue. But when you lose it here, man, it is really hard to get it back. That saying about get back in a horse and ride, you can only be broken so many times. Broke, got it back, broke again, and anxiety and it. I wish I could blame that on somebody else. I blame it on myself, but I can look back and see what the way I've been promoted by different promoters and what they thought was cool, whether they thought that was going to add to my Hall of Fame resume or get me on your show someday. I don't know.
Huh.
I don't think I don't think that was the game plan.
Well, you just said a word, Rick, that I've been thinking about a lot and talking about a lot, and that's anxiety. Um, and to hear Ric Flair, who to me is the model of self-confidence, and you look like $1,000,000, you spoke like $1,000,000, you perform like $1,000,000, you doubted yourself, even even we're talking now 20 years. I'm not talking about the 2021 version of you, the 20 years ago version of you. You looked in the mirror and didn't believe that you were the man, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you get over that?
Well, the first time I had that problem, I ended up going back to WC. I went up to WWE, and I they made me the champions of the Royal Rumble, and then that line that we established this interview over, and I was there for a year and a half, and it was absolutely fabulous. And then Vince said to me, I was 42. He said, we're gonna go younger. And he said, if you want to go back, they've been calling me every day. So I'm sure they're calling you, which they had been. Go ahead and go. So I went back, and between the time I left there and I got there, the management had changed, and Ole Anderson was now in charge again. A guy who I was very close to at one time. I still don't understand a little. I'm really still stuck on what our issues are. But anyway, he looked at me and he said, "Well, you just got beat last night on national TV. It was a loser leave town match with me and Kurt Hennig." And I'm right in the middle, right? He goes, what good are you to me here?" And I thought to myself, I've been in the WWE, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble. The place was in shambles. And I looked at him. I said, "I'm a bigger star. I could get beat every Monday night and be a bigger star than anybody got here now." But instead of argue with him, I did say that to him, but rather than sit down and debate it with him, I walked next door to Bob Dew, and I said, "Bob, it's me or him. I'll get on a plane tomorrow." Bingo. That's probably why he's mad. But the truth. I just say him go around with a couple other guys that tried it. All I did was work hard, and there'd be 1,000 guys that could say, "Thank you, Rick, for making me who I am." You know what I mean? That was my job, and I love doing it. And I didn't look at it as being work. You know what I mean? But anxiety. I have wrestled matches where I couldn't feel my hands.
Because you were so nervous?
No, because I had anxiety. And then I had what's called agoraphobia for a while too, where I couldn't get myself to leave the house.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
When was that?
Um. Okay. I have to think about what house I was living in at the time. Um. Between 80s, it was in the 90s. It was with the um I'm trying to think. I'll tell you what had happened is I was traveling with Arn Anderson and Kevin Sullivan and somebody else, and we were up in small towns, Ohio, and I was wrestling JYD. And Arn Anderson had he'd rented a white van because he knew I was so wrecked over this whole thing that I was involved. It was just a constant way of pushing me down. You know what I mean? And he ran like he, and he rode the milk van on the side, and we rode around for the weekend. And I was cracked. I called Kevin Sullivan. I said, Kevin, you come down to my room, and Kevin Sullivan flew with me home from Detroit, and I went in the backyard. Nobody was home. My wife was out of town, and I just realized. And then, um, literally for about a month, I would have a hard time driving out of my driveway and going to the airport to catch flights.
What was the issue? What was plaguing you?
I I felt like if I wasn't in my house or my backyard, I had about 2 acres of land with that home. If I wasn't there, that I was lost. I didn't have anything. I couldn't attach myself to it. I wasn't having any fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, but wrestling when you can't feel your hands, especially when I'm going to do a flip or I'm going to push off somebody for a backdrop or take a press slam or something. Yeah, it was brutal. Now, when I went back up north, I had self confidence issues when they brought me back, but I didn't experience any of that. It was just like when I went back, I was never supposed to wrestle again. And then Vince, they called me and said, or Shane called me and said, "What do you think about wrestling my dad?" I said, "Absolutely not." I said that wasn't part of the deal. Of course, that went in one ear and out the other.
Hmm.
So, but I mean, I look back on that match and it was so bad. People will say, "Oh, that was good," two guys in their 50s. But I could have been so much better. It's like with Shawn Michaels when I retired, I was 59. Everything worked physically. I could take any bump in the world, anything, but I didn't have it here. I look back on that match and people go, "Oh man, that match was great." What was great only because of Shawn. I was there physically, but when you're so preoccupied, and think about this, can you imagine if you're going into a situation where you had to um, make an appearance or work or fight, and you were preoccupied with not being able to do it? How could you possibly succeed?
Mhm.
And all I spent at WrestleMania that whole night wrestling Shawn for that whole 20, almost 30 minutes was I kept thinking, can you make it? I wasn't thinking, how do I make the match better? I wasn't like my whole life was like this. Do this, the crowd go this, do this, do this. I mean, I was what we call a ring general. I knew where I was. I mean, I never knew with less than by a foot where I was in the ring. I knew what to do to get the crowd going. I knew what to do to make them mad. I knew how to make them laugh. And that whole night, I just spent saying, you can get through this. Just listen to Shawn. Just listen to Shawn. And we got through it. And then, of course, you go back and everybody goes, God, that was the greatest thing in the world. And I go to myself, man, if I just could have been me, I could have been so much better. I know it wasn't. Everybody thought it was great, but it was only great because of Shawn. Shawn Michaels, and people, they laugh at this, and it's going to be in his upcoming on the A&E special this Sunday night. His life story or a bio on him, and he carried me, and I'm not saying that because he carried me. He is the best performer I've ever been in the ring with, and I've been in the ring with everybody. There are guys that are close, but we'll see it's not just for a short time. It's for a long time. You know what I mean? It's great to be a champion for a day, but if you get beat the next day, it's not the same if you have a little bit of time behind you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you being so honest about this. And I don't want to keep you longer. I could
No,
talk to
no,
you for
Clay.
more.
I have no problem because I was going to reach out to Kev. I heard Kevin Love had anxiety.
Yes.
a couple years ago, I've met him, but I didn't have his number. But anxiety. I mean, I can imagine what it's like trying to make a 3-pointer with Anthony Davis guarding you.
Yeah.
If you got anxiety, you know what I mean? It comes in different ways. You
Yeah.
know,
Have you found that there was something to help you get over the hump, or is it just, as you said, riding the wave and eventually you kind of get back on track?
I just fought my way through it because I couldn't take a day off. I
Right.
wrestled Scott Steiner one night in a long match, and the anxiety. I had just gotten my hair cut like 2 days before. I look at myself and I go, oh my god, and I just wasn't myself. I had anxiety. So preoccupied with why is this guy doing this to me? I wasn't even thinking. You
Wow.
know what I mean? I was in a tag match the other night where I was Arn and I against Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, and we were in St. Louis, and I just can remember Ron throwing me into the ropes, and I was thinking, will I feel my hands to do the flip?
Wow.
It's hard to explain. I could give you, probably multiple other examples, but the worst was when Kevin Sullivan took me home.
Wow.
Because because the thing of it is, you can't just in an unsympathetic world that our wrestling business is, it is unsympathetic. Basically, there's no sympathy anywhere in the world anymore, but which is sad because everybody's so wrapped up in their own problems. And I don't want anybody to think this is a problem of mine now. It's an interesting story for you, but there is, you've just the only way to beat it is to hang in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you're going to be subject to criticism. They're going to say you're off. You didn't do this that night. You didn't do that in my line of work, right? But thank God I could talk. Didn't throw off my thought process talking, and it seems to be all forgotten. But the truth is, there are certain people and you'll find that out as you get older. There are people in your life that you're never going to ever forget for being there for you when you needed it because they didn't need to be there. And that would be Vince, Hunter, Stephanie, Wendy, right here, my daughters. I mean, you know what I mean? As wrapped up as they are in their own personal lives, I know that I can talk to them, and they feel the same with me. So I'm a lucky guy. That story about having 5 friends at any point in time in your life after 50, I've got a lot more than that at 72.
How do
And
you think?
but most of them not are not in wrestling.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And those bonds come and go,
Mm-hmm.
and no more than a guy will text you something nice the next day. He's saying, well, Flair could have done this or Flair could have done that. I just got a text from him a week before saying, you know what I mean? You know how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
You know who the players are.
Mm-hmm. How do you think life would be like for you, or your career would be like, if you were on top like you were 70s, 80s, 90s, but in this social media era? Not just because, there's a cell phone everywhere you're at, in a bar, club, this and that. So, people talk about Michael Jordan in the 90s and all the things that he did, maybe couldn't get away with it in this day and age, but also with the criticism and, people writing things. I mean, I would imagine the athletes these days, the guys in the back, they read that stuff and it messes with your psyche. It messes with your mental state. How do you think it would have affected you, your personal life, but also, what you did in front of the public?
Well, if you're asking, okay, I think it's a two-part question. If I had my character on TV today,
Mm-hmm.
this character just wrestling wise and talking wise, they could build another brand around me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm that confident of that remark
Mm-hmm.
because everything I was doing now, so many of the guys, I'll walk in and a guy's wearing a suit today, and I'll say to him, and it's very nice. I'd say, "Sharp dressed man, you
Mm-hmm.
got it from you, Nate." I mean, you know what I mean? You
Mm-hmm.
got it from you. So I think it's more the impact you've had on people now is what, and people will say that to me, man. Like I was going to text Miz last night. He was wearing a platinum Rolex. You could see him a mile away. I was going to say, like, Rolex wearing. So I'll give you an example. Darius Rucker was doing the CMA awards, right? And he had on a gold Rolex. So it was live. I was watching it. And I text Darius. I said, "Your Rolex wearing?" He said, "Yeah, and limousine riding." No, you know what I mean? So I don't know why Rolex, I don't have some kind of a deal with them.
You should. You
That's
deserve
their
one.
next gig. Yeah, but social, I would have had to really put the brakes on my outside ring activity. And it's funny, I know Mike pretty well, right? And I've socialized with all those guys back in the 90s and some of them in the 80s, especially Charles Barkley. Man, I would like someone just to follow me and Barkley around right now.
Oh my gosh.
I just saw him. He's got a place in the Four Seasons in Atlanta. He's got his own condo. He bought.
Wow.
So he is the king holding court in downtown Atlanta.
That's
I'll
amazing.
send you a picture of my wife sitting in his lap. It's every man's worst nightmare.
Could I ask one thing that I love about that
Yeah.
promo, just going back to it? One of my favorite things, unfortunately, I can't ask him anymore, but there's a subtle moment in there that is brilliant when Mean Gene looks off to the side and says, "Put that cigarette out." Was there anyone there with a cigarette, or was that just the brilliance of Mean Gene Okerlund? You know what I'm talking about? That one.
No, I think it probably was Heenan. Was Heenan standing behind me then?
No, yeah, it was you, Heenan, and Mr.
But
Perfect.
I think Bobby had his arm around Gene.
Because to me it looks like he's like talking to the paparazzi or something, and he just looks off to the side. He goes, "Put that cigarette out," and I just love that for a second. He was such a great performer, and I was just wondering if that was just him just adding to the moment.
Yeah, nobody. I mean, just I'll tell you a great story about Gene you'll like too. So I can't answer that question. I thought it would be Heenan like holding the cigarette off because Bobby smoked regularly, which ultimately, as you know, just
unfortunately, yeah,
so many cancerous issues with him. But Mean Gene, the NFL recruited him big time, and at the end of the day, because he had the voice, as someone that does this kind of stuff for a living, like as you're doing now, you can never beat that voice. And Gene, the way he's structured and the way he thought, and so quick. They decided that because he was Gene Okerlund in wrestling, he could never be Gene Okerlund in the NFL. In other words, it's kind of like John Madden coming over and calling Raw. You know what I mean? And which my hat's off to is oh god,
Pat McAfee.
Yeah, Pat. Yeah, Pat on SmackDown now. He does a great job.
Yeah, he's done a great job. Yep.
Okay, Pat and Corey are fabulous. You know, and as you know, in our business, not yours, the announcer can make or break you. If the announcer wants to be, could wander off path and say something, it's just it's like you'll love this. Roddy Piper, God rest his soul. I hope you saw his bio. Did you?
I did.
It was unbelievable. They didn't play one story of me and Piper. I told them, can you believe that? What the hell?
I feel like they could have done 4 hours.
Ariel, you have no idea. He traveled with me when he didn't have a job for a year before he went to the. I took him to Puerto Rico, Japan. He had one trip in Japan, never again. Yeah, he wasn't going to leave ahead of schedule, but we got him to keep him a couple more days. But oh god, he was fun. But so when Piper left the Carolinas, they had an argument with the Crockett's and went down to Atlanta. They made Roddy have him do color with Gordon Soley, and so they said, Roddy, what do you think you would have done with what would have, if it were you in the ring right now? What strategy would you have? Roddy went, I would have beat him already. off to his next venture. You know what I mean? He was so quick. I mean, I thought it was hilarious, you know. And then another time, Bob Armstrong was talking, and Bob had this massive upper body, right? But he had thin legs, you know, which is just an example of a guy that worked his upper body. You've seen him, didn't work his legs that much, right? And so he just won the championship. And Piper said, I think with those legs, Bobby better off running in the Kentucky Derby than wrestling me. You know, he was just so quick, and it was then another commentary job gone. You know what I mean? And you know, as commentators, not so much in our business, it can make and break you. I think Pat
100%.
has done a great job. Yeah.
I'll leave you with two last questions if I can. Um, you know,
Sure.
I don't know if you know this, but a big part of MMA events, fans love to yell out "woo" in the middle of the event. Are you aware of this? Like during the UFC fights?
Yes.
And how did,
Yes.
because it actually, believe it or not, it actually annoys some people because it happens at all times
Yeah.
in the middle of a fight. When you hear this, what do you think?
Yeah. The same thing as the interview. You know,
It's kind of wild, right?
I don't think it speaks to, you know, being a great wrestler and like that. Just something I started doing it that I can't put it in print on commercials. So, um, because what's happened is I've done, you know, I used to go to the arenas, WWE. I'd get to an arena and they would say, the people in our company would say, the building manager wants you to do, you know, something hypothetically for the Bruins,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of got it kicked off with a kid they drafted in the early 2000s, Thornton.
Joe
I
Thornton.
think, huh?
Joe
Yeah,
Thornton.
yeah. He went to Boston originally, and now I think he's with the Sharks now. He may be retired,
Mm-hmm.
but and I'm a big hockey fan, so I went, yeah, da da. Joe Thornton, #1 pick, and woo woo woo, right? So they started playing. Then the Hurricanes came to the Carolinas, and so the guy from the Hurricanes called me and said, "I'll give you season tickets. I'll have you come up and make a vignette." Then I did it for the Hurricanes, right? Then the guy that owned the Charlotte Hornets at that time moved to New Orleans. I did it for the Hornets and Charlotte Byron Davis of the Hornets. Then I went down to New Orleans and did it for Chris Paul. But once you've done it, even though Chris has gone to 3 different teams since, New Orleans plays all the time. But you know, why would I argue about it? It's great. You know what I mean? It's 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 um it has no reflection on my wrestling skill, but it's just something that I did to create excitement, and I once again, it's flattering.
Yeah,
Well,
part of your legacy.
every time somebody chops something in the ring, Ariel, I can promise you right now that nobody was chopping anybody. And Wahoo would overhand chop me, and he hit me so hard, Wahoo McDaniels, that the only way to, without punching him in the mouth as hard as I could, the only way to hit him back, where I could, you know, stick him, would be to hit him as hard as I could left. And that's how it started.
Wow.
You watch the kids now, especially with, it's really hard when you don't have a live audience. But boom, 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 and they aren't making a noise, they're going to haul off and do this, because even though it's not live sound, people are going woo. You know what I mean? In the background, or in a live audience. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
for sure. For sure.
Yeah, live audience for sure. You know how many kids chop now?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Um,
So
I mean, it's just part of your legacy and the
yeah,
catchphrase and the interviews and the
mhm.
robe and the music, and the woo. It's all part of why you remain a cultural icon. I will ask you this question. I think it might be a very hard question to answer, but I'll ask it
Mhm.
anyway.
Please.
When were you your happiest, Rick? What's the happiest moment stretch of time of your career and life?
Well, the happiest I've ever been in my life is right now. Again, I don't even have to think twice about that. The other second happiest time was in the 80s. Most rewarding time was with the WWE from 2001 to 2008. So most fun 80s, happiest right now. Um, Number one, I'm healthy. Number two, I've got the greatest wife in the world. And and I say this um, because I deserve a lot of blame for anything that failed in my prior life. But in all fairness to the blame that falls on me for that, when you're not there, you know what I mean, because you're at work, it's hard to figure out where the blame comes. You know what I mean? I'll give you an example. When I still go to work, I don't wrestle, but I'll leave Wendy for 3 or 4 days, and go somewhere. Like she's been to Iceland this year. She's going back to Iceland. She's been to France. This is all during the COVID. Where did you go to Cairo? I mean, I don't, I don't worry about, and she doesn't worry about me. And that's a big thing. If you don't have trust in a relationship and trust in a person, granted, I brought a lot of that on myself, but you can't be calling someone at 8 o'clock at night when you're getting ready for live TV and going da 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 da. You can't do it
Mm-hmm.
because you're on live TV. You have this opportunity that Vince McMahon or whatever promoter was, Jim Crockett, you got to be on. And if you're distracted, which I've been, if you're not on and you miss something, then you want to kill yourself for not being on top of it and just being able to say, shut up. And don't tell me when to go to bed. You know what I mean? I just worked 9 hours. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It takes two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it had to be brutally difficult to be married to me because of my schedule and because of the way I sold myself and all that. But I can also that I know the difference between support and control. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one's telling you how to format your show in your house. I can guarantee you that because only you know what you do, and only you know how you feel in your heart. And the outside distractions can be so much that they're impossible to live with. That was my case a couple times. Trust me, I did a lot of damage um, when I was not when I just wasn't behaving. There's no other way to put it. Not out of control. I just was not behaving. I was Ric Flair, and I wanted the world to think it, and I didn't care if I was married or not. It wasn't about that. Wasn't about women. That was just me living life.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be the biggest spender. I wanted to wear the best clothes. I did. I wanted to buy drinks for everybody. Every bit of that is true. I can't possibly explain to you how I can justify how, but that was my thought process because I really did think I was the greatest. I thought I was Joe Namath, and everybody else wrapped one. Joe Namath bought a mink coat. I bought a mink coat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy here. There's a guy here in Atlanta, Friedman Shoes, Bruce Friedman,
Mm-hmm.
world famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
I bought 135 pairs of alligator shoes from him
Wow.
when I did the thing for Adidas, right? We were going to do a little commercial down there. That's a lot of alligator shoes.
What a life.
Yeah,
What an amazing life.
changed my life, my clothes, and I tried never to wear the same suit every week. I mean, you can look at it. Who knows? Doesn't make sense, but it got me on your show today.
Hey, let me tell you, Rick, this has, I mean, I can't even put into words what this conversation has meant, and I'm sorry for keeping you for an hour,
No,
but
I love it. Listen, I'm having a good time.
I really, truly,
Wendy does not sit over here and tell me I'm the greatest of all time by any means. She doesn't listen to my bullshit. She's over here going, come on, Rick.
and that's what makes it a good
Yeah,
partnership, because you
I
can't hear
know.
that at home, right? Someone has to
And
keep you in check.
zero.
But I am delighted to hear that you are at your happiest right now. That's
I
that's a
am.
very powerful and beautiful thing
Yeah.
coming from someone like you who has lived a very, very full life. So
Well, I look at. I mean, Wendy's got 4 kids, right? So I feel like in part Well, I know I've raised two, but in part I've raised three families now. All four of our kids are honor students on college and high school level. Your youngest one's going to Arizona State next fall, so they'll all be gone. Maybe I'll get them attend in. The other one is graduating from Georgia, summa cum laude, Thursday night, and is number one on the FBI list. They're not hiring right now.
Wow.
But graduating in top 1% at Georgia Business School. I actually have all my stats down so I don't get checked later on. The other one's at Auburn. Her son's at Auburn. And her other daughter is a Gator. So I'm back pulling for the Gators this year, only because the coach at Georgia won't give me the time of day. His loss. He's limited. Dan Mullen reached out, so I'm going with Dan. And I got free tickets from Arthur Blank on the 50-yard line for the Falcons. So life is good, man.
Well, enjoy it, Rick. Thank you so much for the time. I know you'll be watching UFC 262 this Saturday as Michael Chandler tries to pull off what you did in 1992 and win that.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to post something nice to him. Yeah.
Great. I love it.
Who do you like?
Well, you know, Rick, fighters are very sensitive, and when you pick against them, they remember it and hold it against you. So I'm going to keep one. I'm going to keep that one to myself.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Well,
it will be great. I'll say that the fans will win. How about that?
Yeah, well, that's great. No, I just I'm obviously pulling from. I've actually talked to Michael. We've traded numbers.
Yep.
And I've talked to him. I'll text him good luck and all that. I don't know the other guy. So yeah, that's a good answer on your part because
thank you.
You got to see him. I like Cormier a lot too. I've never met him, but please tell him I said hi.
I will. I will tell him.
I'm a big fan of his too. Huh?
Chael Sonnen as well. I know you're a
fan
of his.
Yeah. Just I actually, I thought was cool. He came to Piper's funeral.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he sure did. And that it's nice when you see people, that have crossed demographic, that people of that influence, like Rhonda, he had some influence on Rhonda.
Yep.
And then of course to see Chael come to the funeral, you look around and you say, well, these people are so respectful because Kitty had the service out in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? And where some people would say, well, it's hard to get there. The people that were his friends were there. And that was nice. So give my best to him too.
I will. And my best to you and your family. Yeah.
You are the man.
Thank you.
Because the nature boy said so. Woo!
Oh man, that is tremendous. Rick, all the best. And I hope we could do this again soon.
Please call me anytime. Woo! My man, Ariel. Styling and profiling. Bye, man.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.